Good evening and welcome to the Wednesday, May 27th, 2026 Penfield Town Board Work Session. I will now call the meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Of course. Barry?
Here.
Dean?
Here.
Getz?
Here.
Lang?
Here.
Teglash?
Here.
Thank you. Tonight we will begin with a guest, and I want to introduce Spencer from Bonadio to present the draft financials presentation. How you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
Good.
Thank you for having me. So Randy Shepard is the partner of the audit. He couldn't be here today, so I'm filling in for him. So I just have a few documents to go over today from the results of the audit. You'll see there's a packet. There's 3 items there. We have the required communications letter, the financial statement draft, and management letter. So I'll go over the first 2 documents. So the first one you'll see looks like a letter on the front. So this is a standard letter that we go through every year. It's required for the audit. I'm just going to go through a few of the items on here. So on page 1, the first item I'll go through is the significant audit matters. So the first thing is there's no new accounting policies that were adopted this year, so made it easier for Sarah and her team because there was a new one last year with compensated absences that took some time to get it implemented. And then further down on that first page, there's the sensitive estimates. So we just point out the few things that are more sensitive. So there's the other post-employment benefits liability and the net pension liability. So those are both actuary driven. So that's why it's more of a significant estimate. And then we also have compensated absences, which I just mentioned was new last year, but there's a lot of estimation in determining that liability. Going to the next page, I'm just going to skip down a few lines here. We would say here if there was any difficulties in performing the audit, we had none. It was pretty clean from a conversation and getting everything we needed piece, so we had no issues to report there. And then we go through the corrected and uncorrected misstatements. So you'll see on the back page of this letter, there's Exhibit A, which shows all of the entries that were made during the audit. It's summarized by client entries and audit entries, just indicating if there was entries provided after we received our initial trial balances. So that's summarized and shows the change in fund balance there. And then we also talk about any disagreements with management. So we're happy to report there weren't any disagreements of any sort. And then this last section here on page 2 talks about if management decided to talk to another audit firm or something of that nature and didn't have they wouldn't have all the information to make an opinion. So to our knowledge, none of that happened anyways. So we're just stating that there that did not happen. On page 3, we just talk about here other matters. So there's required supplementary information you'll see in the financial statements. So those are just schedules and items that need to be reported. And then there's also supplementary information, which are just schedules to aid in the financial statements. And then on page 4, you'll see the Exhibit A, which just talks about the different adjustments for the different funds. Nothing really to talk about here. Like I said, a lot of it is just client entries, just entries that came in after the trial balance, which can happen based on accruals and invoices coming in, things of that nature. So, but if you had any questions, I can answer any of those. And that's the required communications letter. And then you'll see the big packet here is the draft financial statements. So I'll just point out a few things in here. I know it's a lot of pages, so I don't know if you're going to read it all, but the few things I want to point out specifically is page 1. So this is the independent auditor's report. You should see that at the top there. And here we say in the second paragraph down, In our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects. So that's the highest level of assurance we can give. So that's really the piece that you'd want to pay attention to. If there was any issues, there would be a difference set there. So it's a clean audit, so I have to report that. And then we can jump to page 12. So just want to point this out. This is the statement of net position. So this is taking all of the funds activity plus all the long-term items and reporting it as if this were like a commercial entity, a full accrual entity. So this shows the total net position. There is $126,744,807. That number is not really significant because it's not the day-to-day that you're dealing with, but it just kind of shows the overall healthiness of the activity here at the town. And then I'm just going to flip over to page 14. This is probably more relevant information. This is the balance sheet for the governmental funds. One thing different I want to point out this year is the library fund became a major fund this year. So major fund is determined based on a whole standard on how much liabilities or assets or revenues or expenditures. So this doesn't really change much. It just basically came out of that total non-major governmental funds column and moved into its own fund column. And on this page, you can also see the total fund balances. So you can see towards the bottom, there's about 43 million there of total fund balance. The general fund makes up about 17 million of that. So healthy, and it's all positive numbers there, so that's good to see. Sometimes if there are negative numbers, it's really with like the capital projects fund, as spending happens and then a bond would be issued, which happened this year, that's where the revenue comes in and offsets those expenditures. All right, and then just gonna skip to page 16. There's a change in how the major funds were reported a few years ago, so you'll see at the top under or above the public library fund, there's the formerly non-major fund, just pointing out that it used to be non-major. And if you were to follow this all the way down at the bottom, there's fourth line from the bottom, it says fund balance beginning of year as previously reported. So that would show what the prior year financial statements would have said as the beginning balance. If you look at the total non-major governmental funds, it shows 6 million. And then we're saying if we move the public library fund out of there, now it's 5.6 million. So, but the total's still the same. So it's just showing how it's being reported. All right, moving on to page 49. So page 49 is the budget and actual schedule. So for the major funds, minus the capital projects fund, this shows the change from the budget to the actual numbers and showing if there's a positive or a negative variance based on what was budgeted. You can see here for the general fund, a little less revenues came in than were budgeted, but there was also a lot less expenditures than they were budgeted. So the excess is a positive 1.6 million, and then once you account for the other financing sources and uses, basically the transfers between funds, there's just a change in fund balance of that negative 342,000. So nothing major there, normal operations. So we have no concerns there. And then this next few pages are just the other major funds. So you have the highway fund on page 50, which talks about the change in fund balance there with the variance positive 970,000. And then the next page, 51, shows the public library fund, which will be the first year seeing this since it wasn't a major fund last year, but just a $19,000 negative change, but no concerns there either. All right, just going to skip ahead again. Page 56. So if you remember from that fund balance sheet, they showed all the major funds and then it showed a column for non-major funds. These next few sheets just break down what the non-major funds are comprised of. So on this page, it shows the debt service fund and the total non-major special revenue funds, which then 2 pages later on page 58 breaks that down to show what's all the non-major special revenue funds. So this is what we call the supplementary information. So it's additional information for financial statement purposes and not required as part of the audit, but we still did audit these numbers on those pages. So that is the main financial statement draft. Is there any questions on that?
movement of the library fund, is that a correct practice? Is that something that most towns do? So we'll do that, we'll continue to do that going forward?
Yeah, so it really depends on the calculation and on where the activity rests for the year. So if there's, for instance, not a lot of liabilities in the other funds, which is what actually made this calculate as a major fund.
Okay.
So it just depends. Next year it could become non-major again, and that's what the reporting shows, previously major or previously non-major, so you can kind of track what falls off or comes on. But we do show all the funds regardless, so just placement really, if it's on the front page or in those back schedules.
So it's more transactional based?
Exactly, yeah, it's just really for the presentation.
Okay, thank you.
And it means we audit a little bit more of it too, because it's a major fund, so a little more work for us, but that's okay. Any other questions? All right, that's everything I had, so if you think of any questions, feel free to reach out to me and I can answer anything you have.
One question, next steps, everything is draft, subject
Yes.
to change. When does this, what's the process in making this final?
Yeah, so I'll send over a representation letter, which will be signed, pretty much saying that management agrees to what's in these statements, and then once we receive that representation letter, we can issue final financial statements. So I believe that approval will come at the board meeting next week.
Resolution.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Okay, so next we're going to do the approval of minutes. We have two sets to look at. The first is the April 22nd work session minutes. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the April 22nd work session minutes.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Barry,
Aye.
Dean,
Aye.
Getz,
Aye.
Lang,
Aye.
Teglash.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, next we will approve the special legislative session minutes. Do I have a motion to approve?
Moved.
Second.
Barry,
Aye.
Dean,
Aye.
Getz,
Aye.
Lang,
Aye.
Teglash.
Aye.
Thank you. We were scheduled to have a second guest tonight, but they were asked to postpone. They were not able to make it, so we will move into the department head updates. And I will start with Bob Moore from DPW.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Need this one. So, for the department activities we've had, everybody's probably well aware that we have completed the oil and stone process in the town. So everybody's roads are all nice and stony. So the sweeper will be starting out, I believe, tomorrow morning on the roads that we first started on last week. So they'll start sweeping them up now. They did start roadside mowing. We got half the town done. They'll finish that up now that we're back off of the oil and stone. The parks guys, they've been painting and striping the sports fields and grooming Little League and getting all that stuff around on that, plus mulching the town complexes. And we're back on street lighting now that the weather's gotten better. And we had some of the lights that were damaged from underground utilities work. So now that the weather's gotten better, we're going back through and hitting those spots. So hopefully we'll get them all up and going. If anybody's drove by the Jackson Road complex, they'll notice the old building is gone. So the demo has been completed on that. They are prepping the fuel tank area. They're going to pour concrete, I believe, on Friday. And in 2 weeks or so, the tanks are supposed to show up, so they'll start seeing some activity over on that. We're working with the foreman right now on the 2027 budget needs. So we're getting those together, so we can meet with Sarah and all those. And like I said, we're putting the flowers in, the mulching and the mowing and all that for the town, making it beautiful. And we're starting to work with the Monroe County DOT, lining up the work that they've got going in town, and we're trying the best we can to try to get that done before the July 4th holiday. We'll see how that works out, if we can get everything in place. Staff openings, we still have a highway laborer. We have a facilities evening from Saturday through Wednesday, and we have a part-time in the clerk in the DPW. Budget, I'll leave that for Sarah. And some board action items, we just got some good news back in from the Ag and Markets. It's looking very favorable for us for the grant that we applied for, so we should have some more information very soon, but it's looking very favorable for us, so that's good news.
Would you remind us on that grant?
So the grant we did for the dog kennel in a new DPW, we had to do some design rechanges from when the building came in to come into compliance, and Carrie did a job writing the grant and all that, and it's to help offset some of the costs for that additional work that we had to do on that, and some other stuff that we can put towards that we are, with the kennels, the new kennels and all that. So it should be nice when we get it done.
Good, thank
So
you.
Great.
that's it.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's it. Short and sweet.
Okay, next, let's go to Alan Wrights, Building, Zoning, and Fire Marshal.
Hello.
Hello.
All right. A few things going on in the building department, and as usual, because it's this time of the year where everything starts to explode. So we've done about 167 permits since the last April work session that I was unfortunately not able to come to, so I apologize for that. We did 320 inspections, 30 code enforcement cases have been opened. It's the season now for tall grass, so. And then we've done 25 fire safety inspections within the last month. The biggest thing that we have going on right now is our data migration for GovWell for the software system is well underway. Thank you for Dave Renner for helping me with that, because a lot of the terminology they use, I have no idea what they're talking about. So, I want to thank him. And we are transitioning into trainings. Most of those trainings have now been completed since yesterday. And we are looking to start a live date here within the next probably week or so. So that's kind of an exciting time. It does mean that the new things start to pop up where we'll find some things that maybe need to be tweaked here and there, which we've done with the fire safety modules and also with the the code enforcement module. So that will be somewhat of an undertaking, but we'll get through that, and we're hoping the transition will go fairly smoothly. So, and then projects and updates. There's a few going on that I would like to just touch upon. 1960 Empire Boulevard, which is a 7 Brew coffee shop, is moving along. The footings and the slab have been poured. The structure now is in place, so that'll be transitioning here soon to hopefully opening within, probably a month or two, I'd say at least. But it's moving along. And Chick-fil-A also, 2051 Fairport 9 Mile, is moving along as well. They obviously, you've seen the old building is down, which is great for us. Less of a headache for complaints, but they have already moved on to footings. They had a footing inspection last week, and now we're moving on to the rest of the building. So the Arbors down the street from us is moving along as well. They are now to the southeast corner of the property, and we'll be building some structures along that area. So you'll see some more construction along the Atlantic Road side of things. But they are progressing very, very quickly. So as far as anything with the staff, I just wanted to say that our new hire, Stephanie Walters, has been doing a great job. She's really had to learned quickly, and we've had a lot of vacations where she's the only one in the office that is taking in permits. So she's really starting to get the hang of things, and I'm really glad that we hired her. So, and then also thank you to Kathy Anderson, who's the other clerk. She has taken over for the zoning board administration parts of that. She will be basically the new Christine Shaw, who retired, and she's doing very well as well. So, and then lastly, just working on our budget for the next budget cycle. So that's it.
Any questions?
Thank you.
Great, thank you. The Director of Recreation, Andy Erkfitz, wasn't able to be here this evening, so tonight with us, we have the Assistant Director of Recreation, Sabrina Renner.
Good evening.
Good evening.
All right, so we're also kicking it into high gear, getting ready for summer camp. We have opened an additional location at Harris-Whalen Park. We're lucky enough to have the staff to do that, to take away some of our huge wait list. So that's exciting. We're adding up to 50 enrollments per week in the summer there. So that'll take some of the load off. Concert and event planning, June 5th, next Friday. The Food Truck and Music Fest will be at the amphitheater. That's food trucks and Penfield school bands, and it starts at 4 p.m. The summer concert series starts that next Tuesday, the 9th, and runs Tuesday nights, June through August. Always a good time. Then concerts begin at 6:30 each Tuesday. For Independence Day parade and fireworks, of course, it's scheduled for Saturday, June 27th. And we do have a rain date for the music and fireworks only, not the parade, which will be that Sunday, June 28th. We won't need that, of course. And our Penfield celebrates America's 250th. There will be daily programs, events, and activities running June 27th through July 4th. And that information about all the events will be posted on the website soon. Programs that week are going to include things like the Penfield Trails Committee history hike at Philbrook Park. The library will be doing programs daily. The Penfield Pops Community Band will have a concert at the amphitheater, and we'll be doing an outdoor movie in partnership with Penfield Little League. That'll be a lot of fun. And it's going to be the Sandlot, of course. Some project updates. Shadow Pines South Side Shared Use Trails project. Costitch Engineering is continuing to gather information and do site studies. Color Penfield Green is continuing to do work on the eastern side of the south property, removing invasives and habitat enhancement efforts. The Penfield Charity Golf Tournament will be held on June 15th at Shadow Lake Golf Club. Organizing the tournament, the town is organizing the tournament with the Penfield Kiwanis and Rotary, as we always do. Staff openings, currently we don't, full-time we don't have any. We just hired a new senior citizen program specialist, she's fantastic, Andrea Guarino. She started the 18th of May, a couple weeks ago. She's doing great, working with our current senior citizen program specialist, Pam Drace. We are always hiring year-round aquatic staff, so lifeguards, swim instructors, and the like. And summer camp staff, I believe they're still hiring some, if anybody's still interested in a job for the summer. June through August, of course, camp counselors and site directors are needed. So, in case if there's any last-minute changes in staffing, we can have people on hand for that. That's all I have. It's all on the sheet. Any questions?
Just thank you to you and your staff for the Memorial Day ceremony. It was very well put together, and it was just a wonderful event, just like it is every year. So nice job, everybody that was involved.
Ditto.
It's a great event to plan.
Yeah. it
Very
was
meaningful.
Really, yeah, very meaningful and very well done.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for that.
Thank you, Sabrina.
Thanks.
Okay, next, we will have Amaret Miller, the Director of Personnel.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Town Board, Town Supervisor, Pete. All right, so we are almost done with our summer hiring for camp counselors and lifeguards. However, yes, if you'd like to apply, we are still hiring. We'll be hiring a clerk for IT, a clerk for the clerk's office because of a retirement soon, a part-time clerk for DPW, a new facilities laborer for the evenings to help at the rec center, and a highway laborer, as Bob mentioned. We've made offers to 2 candidates for the sewer department and have 1 auto foreman on deck for board approval at next meeting. It looks like by mid-June, we should be fully staffed, or for the moment. And E&I came to present to town employees on May 22nd at the Senior Center, and we will be offering more trainings like this in the months to come. So E&I is our EAP, Mental Health and Life Organizing Benefit. And preparations for CSEA negotiations are ongoing. We've agreed to ground rules already, but it's a little early to start meeting, but at least that's set. And then finalizing handbook change suggestions with Supervisor Berry. Besides procedural items and human resources, it's a short report.
Any questions?
No?
All right, thank you.
One of my kids, Do Not Disturb is on, and they can break through because they're emergency contacts. So I'm sure it's a critical matter that she needs to know an answer to. I apologize. No, she doesn't even live at home. She probably wants to know something, where to buy something.
Okay, next we have our comptroller, Sarah Reynolds.
Okay, good evening.
Good evening.
Hi.
Okay, it is insurance renewal time. Our commercial package will renew on June 1st, and it will be effective through May 31st of 2027. We've received quotes. We actually went to market this year. We don't always, but we did go to market this year, and we've received quotes from New York Municipal Insurance Reciprocal, Travelers. We did receive a renewal quote from our current carrier, Houston Casualty, and a quote from Trident Chubb. I should have all proposals on my desk tomorrow afternoon. I had anticipated a 10% increase to be built into the 2027 budget, but I am cautiously optimistic because one quote is very competitive at 13% less than our current expiring package and 23% less, or about $59,000 less than the highest quote for 2026-27, which is very exciting. I want to verify that it is all apples to apples in terms of coverage, but again, I'm very optimistic. The 2027 budget is underway. Department heads have been instructed to retrieve their budgets from the finance folder on the drive and submit budgets by June 5th. We have the first budget meetings with department heads next week. The board should have received the call to budget and the budget calendar as well. We should make plans to briefly review our fund balance before we look at all of the department head requests. And then again, towards the end of the process, in the event that the board should decide to use some fund balance towards 2027 operations. So it's good to be informed. Project updates. The finance department will be conducting an inventory of fixed assets over the summer. We established a new threshold of $5,000, but that includes items that were purchased in aggregate. So for example, chairs, that's just an example. The goal is just to confirm that we still retain these items. Things break. So it is possible that at some point we could have purchased 20 chairs and 20 task chairs, and we only have 19 now. So we just want to make sure that we still have those items. I think I've mentioned before, I have 2 RFPs that I would like to issue. One is for auditing services. That's a matter of due diligence. And another would be an RFP or RFQ for a new financial and purchasing procurement software. Let's see, I've reviewed a proposal from Metropolitan Commercial Bank. MCB's Deposit Reserve Program is a liquid high-yield money market account. It is FDIC insured up to $60 million. There are no fees, monthly or transaction. The current annual percentage yield is 3.56% compared to NICLAS, which has been approximately 3.51%. It fluctuates daily, but I have 6 months worth of daily rates demonstrating a consistently small increase over NICLAS. But if we were to move reserve funds over to MCB, it would provide a little extra income. And it also is diversification and thereby reduces concentration risk, which auditors really love. I will forward the information to the board for their review and in the event that they have any questions. But if there are no objections, then I will submit a resolution at some point in the near future to open the account and move the funds. As for the 2026 budget progress, briefly, we've spent about 21% of appropriations, and we've brought in about 42% of revenue, and that's pretty much on par. It tracks with where we were last year and historically. So I feel pretty confident that it will be another successful year. And that's it from finance, unless you have questions.
Okay, thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we'll go to Mark Valentine from Planning and Engineering.
Provided most of my updates to the board last week, so I guess unless the board has questions, I don't think much has changed since my update last week, so I'll close with that.
Okay. Carrie, do you have anything from Developmental Services?
The only thing I would say is that we would love the opportunity to continue the conversation if needed from last week's work session related to LaSalle's landing. I know that there was a question raised, did provide that information to the town board members regarding the allowances for the various 4 prime contracts. So that was the only follow-up item I would have is that particular project. Nothing really else has changed as far as the other projects we've been tracking.
Okay. We'll be discussing LaSalle's Landing under held items.
Perfect.
Okay. All right, thank you to all the department heads for being here this evening. I appreciate it. And if you wish to leave, you may, or you can stay for the entertainment. All right, next we have action items. The first one being 2027 sidewalk discussion with Mark Valentine.
Thank you. So provided in your drop materials a couple of different items. So this is a spreadsheet showing all of the requested sidewalks we've had in the last number of years. So these weren't all this year, but just showing, we do often get questions is, hey, I submitted my request, why isn't my sidewalk picked or not? Here we're showing in rough approximated costs of over $6.8 million of requests for sidewalks. So obviously we can't fund them all. We've kind of continued to chip away at them. If you scroll to the top, I put the three most requested sidewalks are the first three. So the 5 Mile line from the Water Song, we did a piece on 5 Mile this year, so that would continue it to the Webster Town line. Received numerous emails. I didn't pass all those onto the board, but can provide if interested. It's a short segment. It would complete the sidewalk up to the Webster Town line on the north end. The second, and the board received a petition for this, and I believe the town clerk passed the petition along, as well as I put the map in the drop. Atlantic Avenue, so on the north side of Atlantic from the Windsor Ridge neighborhood down to Saldo Lane. It's in a state DOT right-of-way. That would provide access, from those neighborhoods to connect to Baird Road, which then could get down to the library, recreation, the schools on that end. And then the third one that I heard from the Treebrook neighborhood, that's right across on the north side, across from Shadow Pines. There is no quick, easy way for them to cross Atlantic Avenue, so they're looking to get down to the corner to Scribner, either up to the schools for students and or crossed at that crosswalk intersection to get access to Shadow Pine. So I've heard several others. I don't know if the board wants to iterate through all of them. I did provide a map just so you can kind of see them around town where they all are. Right now we're averaging about $100 a foot. So that's for a 5-foot wide sidewalk. So every foot you step, that's $100. So that includes the sidewalk installation, any asphalt repair around the sides, grass seed, and then we've got our miscellaneous is typically, and you'll see the numbers differ on those. Some is we've got to put a pedestrian bridge in, a culvert expansion, extension. So those are some of the costs. We know there's trees to be removed. There's other stuff, in that area. So I say these are preliminary estimates based on all of this. You couldn't do a detailed, estimate on every single one, but just to provide a rough cost. They're anywhere and everywhere all over town. All of them have benefit, and merit. I don't know what would help the board in a decision-making process to it. Obviously, there's a lot here and a lot for the board to consider. It also goes into what I submit as my budget looking into next year as well. So depending on where the board wants to go, what the board wants to authorize us to move forward with, obviously adjusts where we're at. So in a typical here at the bottom, the DPW has the $50,000 is in their budget for existing sidewalk repairs. So that's existing areas, broken sections, areas that they go back and do some repairs on. So that falls into the DPW. New construction falls under engineering. As of late, we've been running $250,000 as our typical budget. The 25, 26, the board upped that because there was a matching grant amount with the county. So the county was matching on any county road 50%. So the board elected at that time to allocate extra dollars to offset or take most advantage of that as possible. But say typically we're in the $250,000 range. So depending upon where the board wants to go, what the board wants to do, obviously that'll adjust our budget. I guess I'll stop talking and see if the board has questions and comments, or if there's things that I can provide to help you make a decision on where.
Any alignment with the active transportation plan? Anything worth really noting here?
Yep, so Atlantic Avenue is obviously an important corridor, so that falls into a lot of the active transportation falls on the main line corridors. So 5 Mile line, a connection to a town to the north. Unfortunately, at this time, Webster doesn't have sidewalks in that area, but it would get you to an adjacent neighborhood. And then the Atlantic Avenue corridor around Shadow Pines. So this doesn't handle off-road stuff. I think that's something coming out of the active transportation plan. We may have to incorporate into our budget is some of those offline or off-road trails that the plan also recommends. So we'll have to coordinate with either DPW or REC or whose budget that falls into if we want to start allocating some funds to those. This just typically deals with on-road sidewalk sections with that.
And how about with the Arbors development? on Atlantic, taking the arbors to Town Hall, was there anything in their developmental budget that,
So
I know
they,
a lot of times we say, oh, they want it waived or don't want it waived with developmental projects.
yep, so they installed wide pathways within their neighborhood, so it does stub up to the gun club property.
Okay.
So there was a request to extend that, and it would make sense at some point. There is a creek crossing there, so as you're looking at the cost, that's an extra cost, is to either extend that box culvert, add an arch bridge or something in there to get that over. Obviously, I think it would make sense to, connect that through. We'd have to negotiate an easement with the gun club to cross over, but that would, open up that development to get to the town hall, athletic fields, amphitheater. As I said, I've talked to many people. I've seen their emails. I've seen the requests. Obviously, there's a lot of great spots and a lot of interest, which is great to see. I'm glad to see all the feedback and input. It's just hard to limit it down of where makes the most sense, or this year, or why not.
And it's hard, and I don't say this in too much of a subjective manner, but I can imagine some residents thinking, wait a second, the arbors just went up, and we've been asking for years.
Yep.
And I get all that, right?
Yep.
It makes it much more
Somebody emailed me
difficult.
today saying we've been asking for 10 years. And
Exactly.
I've had people asking since the day I started, so 20-plus years, and we haven't done those and beyond. So
Exactly. It's hard.
yeah, it's not an easy decision, or not a simple spot. Obviously, I don't an immediate decision tonight. I mean, there's a lot there. But just for time frame, obviously budget season's coming up, so just so we can add into our budget accordingly. And then as we look forward, once the board does decide, then we've got to, we send typically letters out to all the people that are affected, letting them know that's where we plan on sidewalks going in. We've got to get survey done, so go out, do the survey in the area, contact the agency if it's not a town road, county DOT, of what's going on. Then we start into our design elements on it, work with those agencies for approvals, do easements, work on obtaining those through the season, and that's why it takes us so long, and that's why we're looking at 2027 construction for any sidewalks we're discussing tonight.
Mark, as a follow-up, because as you said, it'd be great if we could get this all done for everybody. In your opinion, or if there's data, because as I'm looking at this, and maybe this is just my mind working through this, it seems the connectivity from what we've been working on to the future planning, I would kind of like to see finale. This is just me talking, not the whole board, but it seems logical to me that, for example, again, just an example, folks, if we use 5 Mile Line Road to Atlantic, and we've already been putting in there, how do we continue to follow through in those lines to keep continuity as opposed to breaking it up, and then saying, okay, let's then look at another spot the following year to have continuity at another. Do you follow my logic and how I'm thinking for this?
Yep.
If you have any thoughts, and I'm not holding to it right now, but thoughts as to how that would work? Or,
I think different boards have done it different ways. I mean, you can look at concentrating in one area to try to get those areas completed. Other boards have looked to kind of spread it around town a little bit and give everybody a little bit of something. The past 2 years, we kind of went off the grant and focused, heavily on county roads, just because the 50% matching grant was there. So it made the most financial sense, I think, for the board, to capitalize on that. But I can work with Matt Prinzing. In the past had developed a sheet that looked at proximity to schools, proximity to community areas of interest, how many residents it would affect. He kind of built a matrix that kind of compiled all those to try to help to weigh all the different things. Is how many residents is it benefiting? What's the proximity to parks, schools, those different locations. I don't know if that would be of a benefit or not, but I didn't want to jump to that if that wasn't where the board was going. Or
for me, that would be helpful, because I think it kind of gets, as you said, there's so many important parts. How do we break it up? And I think that there's some good opportunity for discussion as to how folks would want to think it through.
Mark, did you say that there was a map? I don't see one in the
My apologies if it
Files.
didn't make it in there. I do have,
I was trying to peek. Do you want me, could it be on the end drive or could it be on a drive where we can pull it, or is it?
might be on the sidewalk section. If not, my apologies. Board, I'll provide it.
You sent a map about that one area on Atlantic, I think that was an incomplete part. I think maybe that's what we got.
Yeah, we got the PowerPoint that was provided.
Yeah.
with a
Yeah, that
small
was
map.
one resident put together PowerPoint project.
Which was well done, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I say I have a multitude of emails. If the board wants to see backup of, I didn't think the board needed to see every email. I responded, acknowledged all of them, receipt of them, made sure we responded back to every resident that we got it.
Looks like I think so.
Okay.
Do you,
I will get that to the board after this meeting, so you have that, as well as we'll work on developing that matrix to, hopefully maybe focus the location.
Okay.
your best guess, 2020, so 7 years ago, what was the cost per linear foot?
Probably around $75. I mean, I first started, sidewalks were $25 a foot, so it was $5 a square. This year, I think we're paying $89.50. So concrete costs have gone up, labor costs have gone up. Unfortunately, as costs go up, the less sidewalk you put in. The amount of money we've had in the sidewalk fund is adjusted year to year, as well. So, we've tried to.
I will point out
adjust, but
that the active transportation plan draft that's currently under review on page 73 of that document does have a sidewalk gap recommendation table. Now, I don't think these are presented in any particular order of priority, but if you're looking for additional guidance or background for what the consultants suggested as priorities, that might be another opportunity or resource.
What is that again?
That's on the, the active transportation plan.
Yeah.
On the projects of community interest, there is a page dedicated to that. Active transportation plan, the draft documents are in the pull-down list, so you can review that plan. We can also make sure the town board has the direct link to the document.
We can add that in.
Yeah, Mark, if you want to send the map, if you want to send just that snippet with it too.
Yep.
Not the entire document, but at least that portion of it.
Sure.
Be helpful to pare it down.
Okay.
And then I had a question, Mark. You said the first three were the most requested.
This year.
Oh, this year, okay.
This year.
All right. And for the rest of the list, did you go according to request or just what you prioritized based on your knowledge or random?
There are no order, just kind of as we've gotten them in, we've added them through the years. So I just try to keep a running list throughout the year of sidewalk requests we get. I'll keep those going, add to the list. So these are from many years past. So it's just a running list of sidewalks, if it helps to sort them by, what agency they are, we can do that. If, I have it as an Excel spreadsheet, so we can do any, different sorting. Again, my apologies for not having the map. The map kind of shows the areas of town and, filling in some of those gaps. As Councilman Getz had said, if we focus on some of the gap filling, spaces, we can, do that as well. But I haven't ranked them in any other order. I just kind of floated the three as those were the most I heard from this year of the number of emails, phone calls, requests. But all of them have been requested
at some point.
One point in time or another, and in multiple times. So it's not. So sorry, I don't think that gave you any further decision making to make a decision. But if they're not prioritized, I can make them alphabetical if that helps. But.
No, I just was curious about the thought behind the list, and I didn't know if there was any significance, and that's what I was asking.
Unfortunately.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our next action item is we have received bids for a new roof on the Whalen Road barn, and Bob Moore is here to present the bid results.
Good evening again.
Hello.
Yeah, so we went out for bid for the Whalen Road barn, which is the one closest to Shadow Pines South. It's just basically a storage facility right now. The roof is leaking. We're trying to prevent the catastrophe at the other building. We did get 2 bids that came in. The high was $59,772.95. The other one came in at $36,790 with an alternative if they have to use some furring strips in the bad areas. They estimated that for another $1,600, so they have a total of $38,440. That person came on site. He went through that barn with a fine-tooth comb. So he looked at everything. The other guy was just a quick, basically went off of square footage and left. This is for a metal roof and that. So like I said, the other guy, he was there. He went through it, checked everything, and and he came in very reasonable in my eyes for what we're getting out of it. So we're just presenting to see what the town thought, and we can go forward on.
Are you comfortable that we're looking at apples to apples here?
Yes, yes. Like I said, the one that came out, like I said, I think he just went off a square footage of the roof and said it's X amount of dollars per square foot, and went with it because his alternative for the furring is the same price, so he just went off a square foot. This other gentleman that came out, he looked at everything, he got up in there and saw the damage, areas, and he came in with that $1,600 additional cost if need be coming in for the repairs in those bad areas. So I feel that this guy did real due diligence on it. I'd be more than happy going with him. I don't see any reason not to. He is the lowest bid, and like I said, he spent the most time looking the barn over. So.
Questions?
They give a timeline on how quickly they would get that done if awarded?
He said a couple weeks to get going on it.
But we can get on their schedule this?
Yeah. Yep.
And what does it come with? Post, like warranty, guarantees?
It's going to be whatever the metal manufacturer comes with. From my own experience, from my own buildings I've put up, it's like a 30-year they usually do on them. So he'll cover materials as normal.
You check references with these companies?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big roof.
Yeah,
It's a lot of square footage.
yeah,
It's a good price.
Yeah.
yeah.
I would have thought more.
Yep. So.
Other questions?
No?
All right, next steps,
What are you looking for?
Well,
I want to approve a resolution.
Yeah.
Resolution enter into the contract.
Yep.
Yeah, so we can maybe get that for the
For the ledge meeting.
Week?
next week already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I know.
Monday.
So yeah, I'll get one prepared for it for the next ledge, and
Okay.
we can award it.
All right.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we have no informational items. We have 2 held items, the first of which is the fee schedule update with Carrie Ivers.
Yes, thank you. We did, as we mentioned at last week's meeting, the bid opening for the janitorial services contract was May 22nd, last Friday. We received 1 bid from a preferred source provider. That's in New York State contracting, they had the right of first refusal, so even if other bids had been received, the town would be obligated to, if we're to move forward with a contract, as long as they were within a certain percentage of whatever the other bids are, that's the firm that needs to be utilized. I did update the board's drop for this evening and provided that estimate in there as well. And so in light of that information, town staff that we've mentioned before, from facilities, parks, the recreation department, engineering, myself, building, everybody's gotten together to sort of review the potential recommendation for a fee schedule for this particular building, and we all agreed to a number of, that's competitive with Monroe County. They're similar properties, and we're suggesting that $1,500 seems like a reasonable rental fee for this type of space. So we're sharing that as a recommendation. Obviously, I think there's a couple of factors to keep in mind. It is comparable and consistent with what Monroe County is charging for their largest venues or lodge facilities. Ours is larger in terms of occupancy. And then I think also in terms of amenities of what's received. Looking at the square footage and sort of the level of finishes, we believe that the space will be competitive. It's going to be an attractive opportunity or option for folks trying to plan major events. To me, this would be a potentially great location for weddings and other family gatherings. That right now there's I think a need in the larger community and certainly here in Penfield.
And this would be the Penfield resident price?
Penfield resident price, we were recommending at least a minimum of 50% higher for non-resident, or whatever the percentage difference is currently between the other lodges. And I think it's a little bit higher than 50%. I think it's maybe closer to 60% higher. But we feel like that at least there should be a sizable difference between the resident fee versus a non-resident fee.
Okay, thank you.
I wanted to take a step back a bit to the janitorial services.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so first, just to clarify what a preferred source entity is. So this particular one is New York State Industries for the Disabled, and what they do is they represent companies that employ persons with disabilities, and according to state law, if a public facility is looking for service, and there is a company which is represented by a preferred source organization, then that company would get the bid as long as they were within 15% of what would be considered the going rate for that service in that area. So that is where this particular bid came from. Now, the one thing is that we don't have to accept it. We could potentially provide the service ourselves. Have you looked into that aspect of it?
Yeah, so staff did review that. I'm going to invite our Director of DPW to join us back at the table. So I think, I'll defer to Bob certainly on this, but facility staff were at the table and had part of these discussions. They highlighted several challenges. One, the timeline for the required service between rentals is likely going to be very late in the evening, overnight, or early morning hours. These other janitorial services are accustomed to providing overnight services, whereas town staff are not. It could not be completed by one staff person. That would not be a safe environment.
You would need two of them to do it.
And I'll hand it right over to you. I was going to summarize the meeting.
Has the preferred source organization assured us that they can accommodate those hours? Because I know that was a question.
I have not seen it yet.
So Tim Masterton did reach out and
I don't know if he's heard back yet. He was off today, so I couldn't ask him if he heard back from that, because he emailed them Wednesday.
I believe they responded back and they indicated they were able to provide the level of service required. We can ask a clarifying question about the specific hours of operation and the services needed so that there's no misunderstanding, but they indicated that they were aware of the requirements and could meet it.
And to have two people it would take to do that, and then have them work hours potentially of midnight to 6 in the morning or 7 in the morning. And realistically, right now, we're looking at the possibility of 100 roughly rentals for the year, maybe 130 in that range. What are we going to do for the rest of the year for a full-time employee? And it's going to be hard. We have a hard time finding, especially like in the wintertime, the overnight dispatch. We have a hard time finding people for that hours to work, and we're having a hard time finding people for even the evening hours to work, especially on weekends. You're looking at, Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays for sure, So I don't know if we could staff it, if we get the help to do it. It's going to be the huge thing on it. You're going to need 2 people. And like I said, when they're not being rented, how are we going to keep them people busy?
Just to piggyback off of, I think that was the major concerns that were raised by facility staff. Identifying eligible candidates for the position would be a challenge, and then that the work would be so variable and unpredictable. It's based on reservations, so it's not like you're going to have overnight services that are happening consistently. This would be based on demand. One of the things I wanted to point out is, for the purposes of the bid, we outlined 2 levels of services that were included in the contract. Per diem, which is this in-between reservation cleaning, that had, sort of a baseline of these are the services you need. You're washing basic service, all the surfaces, you're cleaning bathrooms, and then there was a monthly cleaning requirement as well that was more in-depth, deep cleaning. And for the purposes of making sure we're going to be able to compare between bids if we receive more than one, is that we asked them to estimate, assuming 100 per diem reservations, per diem janitorial services needs. Using that information, I'm just putting this up on the board, we were trying to evaluate annual operational costs. So what we've done is put in, using that 100 cleaning requirements, 100 per diem cleans, plus the monthly, that's an average monthly cost of just shy of $8,000. This is the spectrum charge. We know there's going to be some portion of TSG and day automation that's related to this site, and then RG&E. We did an estimate of their monthly billing just based on Dolomite's current or 2025 billing, and we just extrapolated that number by square footage. I used a 1.75 adjuster. I mean, technically, Dolomite is half the size of this new lodge. So then the annual operation and maintenance is coming out to be 115. If we had that 100 reservations, the operating costs are just over $1,100 per reservation, just to have some basis of, it's not a number that's being pulled out of thin air. That number also then, the rental fee also includes long-term monies that can be set aside for what we know is going to be equipment replacement as needed, eventually
items.
Capital improvement, building systems need to be updated or items need to be replaced, and then long-term maintenance. So we want to be mindful of that and going into the future. It's nice when we have a beautiful, shiny building, but we want to think about it 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 25 years from now, when, warranties are running out. So
would you, for me, explain, so there's a monthly janitorial services within this well, first, so we didn't receive any other bids?
No.
And the deadline has
passed.
Okay. No matter what, we're paying $15,000 per year for a monthly deep clean. Every month they'll come in and do what they need to do.
Yes.
The per diem is based on 100 days.
But the per diem is going to be charged or billed. In the contract, it says the $100 is being used to calculate a total cost, so you can compare bids, but that's not a guarantee of payment. They're going to be billing based on actual cleaning.
Okay.
And that's that's clearly written on the bid form.
Okay. And there's something about the town of Lockport, is that just where this company is based out of?
I think I think they wrote that wrong.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's
okay.
a
All right.
non-collusion certificate.
Okay, that's good, because I'm thinking,
Yeah.
that's a,
Yes.
They're from Albany, so they probably think we're all Western New York.
possible. Okay.
Okay.
And the company, so NYSED, the actual provider that works underneath NYSED is actually, I believe, locally based. So it's not that an Albany firm is providing it, an Albany organization
It's just where they're.
is the umbrella organization, and they find a local provider. It's Sheen and, I've reinvented their name every time, but I believe it's Sheen and Shine.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. So again, I think the ask would be if the board is comfortable moving with a specified fee for the reservation, we would like to set that at some point to give Recreation Department and the community at large enough time to know what that is, and then, you know, this way there's some lead time leading up to when we think the building would be available for reservation, which is anticipated sometime, we hope, this summer. I don't want to put a date out there because, again, we will have people calling recreation. So it's not that it's an urgent decision, but updating the fee schedule will be a first step before other things can get moving. Obviously, need to, and if you need more time to review the janitorial services contract, we can certainly continue the conversation. That just will push out the availability of the lodge to be brought online.
So where do we want to go from here?
So I think the fee schedule is reasonable to address at this stage, unless there's any objection to that.
Well, I guess just looking at it tonight for the first time, kind of, while I believe that this lodge is beautiful and certainly a gem for the town, I want to make sure it doesn't become a financial albatross, and at almost $100,000 for janitorial services, that means we need at least 68 separate events to break even on just janitorial at that 1,500. And then looking at all the other, you know, unknown expenses, and not that we're in the business of profiting on this venture. Again, I just don't want to see it become this albatross of a financial building. You know, I don't know that I'm comfortable saying yes to $1,500 without a little bit more vetting on the numbers. And is that $1,500 per event, or
Yes.
per day, or
Per reservation, and each reservation is for a single day.
So if I did it a Friday, Saturday, that's 3,000?
Correct.
Right.
Each day is treated its own.
And did you say what the non-resident?
It would be, we were recommending a minimum of 50% higher.
Okay.
So in that scenario, it would be $2,250. Yes, it would be $2,250. Thank you, engineer, for doing such fast math. I mean, I did look at, you know, I and shared this with the board in the updated spreadsheet, that the, looking at the running the numbers, at 1,000, you're really pushing your challenge to meet the, yeah, so looking at 1,500 of what that would look like if just an average of 2 days a week were rented for the course of a year, that's 104 days. If we look at 2.5 days, an average a week in a course of a year, that would be 130 days rented. Recreation and facilities thought that 2.5 days seemed more reasonable, very reasonable, and they thought more like 3 days on average would be what they would expect to see. Based on other rentals. Yeah, and I think the other thing to point out too is that compared to some of the comparable or the county sites that we used as a comp for this analysis, this site has really good parking. So if you look at some of the other sites that are in the county, parking is limited. There might be some access challenges, you know, for ADA and for accessibility purposes. So I think we feel like this, again,
Desirable.
could be a very desirable location.
I think there's no doubt about that. I think, it's a picture-perfect wedding venue, but, I guess my question then on top of that would be, if it is a wedding venue, that's not a graduation party, so generally there's a higher amount of demand for responsiveness to any issues at the building, so, we vetted on who's going to be the person that gets called if there's a building issue, and then what that cost to the town is, if it's going to be after hours, on overtime, on a weekend, on a holiday.
I think I would likely, and again, Bob certainly jump in, the facilities foreman would be on site, and that's one of the reasons and then we have security that's on schedule.
Right, and one of the reasons why we're looking at the other full-time facilities to work Saturday through Wednesday, because we have no one that's working Wednesday through Sunday, so we'd have two facilities people on till at least 11 o'clock at night, and the other one's on to 11:30. So those two would be on covering majority of the rental times if there was any issue that came up during the rental.
And just to be clear, the 1,500 was the minimum.
Yes.
Just so you know, we think that it could go higher. That 1,500 felt like the lowest it should
Right,
be.
we wouldn't want to go any lower than the 1,500.
Oh, I see.
So just to clarify that, I apologize if I didn't convey that adequately.
And going into your spreadsheet, I know you also have down there the county rental data that shows us for the comparative lodge, how often right there, good.
Yeah.
So it shows you what these other facilities are getting on an annual basis, correct?
Yes. I think this was.
Close to that 100 number.
Yeah, so 104 would be that 2, 130 is the 2.5, and
Right.
so, again, and I think not knowing what these lodges are set aside for the purposes of county use, I don't know what their policies have been in terms of, so hard to know whether or not this is maxing out or whether they're setting it aside for other users, and this is what, the rentals look like from, residents.
But these are the three that are most comparative to.
Yes, and I apologize when at the time, I don't think I asked them for Durand Eastman, and I probably should have. I think I just named these three, and then realized Durand Eastman was another comparable that we should include. So happy to get that information as well, if we think it's helpful, but I think this gives us a sense.
I think it's important, though, to look at the weekday and weekend rental numbers on those lodges. So those would be considerably less than what we're looking at.
Say that again, Bill?
So in looking at the lodge rates, so yes, they're rented 111, 136 times. It's $525 during the week. It's
they have different
$1,000
rates.
during the weekend. So, we're at least 50% or 100% higher potentially in the rate, which,
During that week.
Durand Eastman, I believe, I think some of them had a different rental rate. I'd have to look back at that.
it's a fine balance that I think we're trying to look at here, which is, it's a desirable location, it's a beautiful building, it's a great facility. It'd be perfect for weddings. So where do we fall in wedding venue rentals as opposed to county or other town lodges? Because I think that clientele is significantly different. I would imagine we would be on the lower end of the scale for a wedding rental, having only been married one, maybe two times. That I think would be something to look at. But, from, like I said, from a graduation party, family party experience, I think that's too much of a ticket to pay for this sort of thing. So I think you are looking at potentially lower number of events because of that. I don't think we can bank on having the same number as a $500 rental.
It depends on what you want, though.
So I think the other thing, too, is that some of the other spaces, like Dolomite and our other lodges, can only max our occupancy is 99. This is 205. And so I think there's a difference in terms of what folks need or want. you go for a smaller lodge if you're having a smaller event. To have 40 people for a bridal shower in this big giant space would, not be the right venue for that type of gathering.
I know from experience on that December date, when you have a high school graduation coming
Yes.
up, you're already talking to other people to see, okay, if we can get something, we'll have a duel, right?
A joint, friends,
thing.
cousins.
That I could see coming in, but that invite list, you don't do join as frequently because the invite list gets smaller because of the maximum occupancy. So I could see doing this. And are we, going back to Bill's point, do we think we should just set one price, or is there value to saying weekends?
It's up to, that's a board decision. Recreation can accommodate it in their system if you want to differentiate between Monday through Thursday. The thought, when we were talking as a staff, we were thinking that this is a kind of venue that, could this be a location for a convention, like a corporate event or meeting during the day, a conference session, or some kind of a talk, or local, other organizations that could utilize the space during a weekday that we might not be using. And we do have some other events, other folks that utilize Dolomite for business purposes. So that's again, these are the things that staff were talking about. So just relaying that conversation. We'll do whatever the town board tells us to do as far as setting the fees and differentiating.
It's tough, because I agree completely with Bill. I don't want it to be something that becomes the albatross that we're losing, and then we have to increase it, or we're just losing money, but nor do we want to make money. This isn't something where we're looking to be highly profitable off of.
One thing that I really think we need to look at is whether or not that janitorial cost, which is just shy of $800 per nightly cleaning, is truly within 15% of the going rate for that in this area, because to me it sounds high, to be honest with you. And I think that that's something we need to look at.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just a couple other questions. And again, I promise I do like the building, and I think it is a beautiful place. Any concern on a labor-related issue with it being awarded to a third party as opposed to using employees?
No, we've used some third parties already, and that we've been successful in this. And plus, by having someone here later at night and that, and then it's going to come down to how they do, and we're going to have inspections on it when they come in, obviously, to make sure that we're getting the service that we're paying for. And if we're not, then they can either, have chats with them and show them what we want. And if not, I do believe we have the right to, if they're not performing it, we can change.
And then, at this sort of higher end of the scale of event, facilities, normally they have an event manager or somebody who manages the schedule. Do we know that Recreation is prepared to handle another 140, maybe, events to balance that calendar?
Andy was at all of the meetings that we had, and he, certainly, that's one of the reasons we wanted some lead time so that staff can, gear up. But as he indicated, that the system's is ready to be updated with adding this in as soon as we're ready. So their staffing is ready to accommodate. The nice thing about this location is that because there will be remote access control, that actually simplifies the rental process. So it's mostly all online, and I know that Andy will be working with Pete to update some of the rental agreement documentation, so there's a clear understanding of the do's and don'ts and what's expected for each rental.
And it's something you said earlier about parking. One of the issues that we can always have with our existing lodges, especially Harris Whalen, is somebody reserves the lodge for the day and, there's football being played or there's something, and next thing you know, the parking lot's full. Have we discussed that? How do we ensure that, especially for a wedding or a big event like that, that parking will be restricted?
So one of the discussion points was if there is going to be some type of an outdoor event at Shadow Pines property, in the vicinity of the lodge, then the lodge would not be available for, if it was not rented already, it would be blocked for rental, and that user would have to pay a special permit, like a special event fee, which is already currently available in the fee schedule for recreation. One of the things we want to discuss is whether or not that fee schedule should be modified for this site or across the sites, because it means that you're bringing the lodge offline from availability. So for example, if an organization, like, I'm not going to throw any, disc golf is going to conduct a tournament on a Saturday, then we're not going to make that we wouldn't allow the lodge to be rented that day. We'd block the lodge. They'd have to pay a special event fee. But we think that special event fee at this location might be too low, because comparatively, you're then losing a potential, whatever the number is, but some larger lodge fee.
Amount of the lodge fee, but something.
But yeah, so maybe it's half, maybe it's something that, have it set so that there's a way to recoup the law. It's taking the building offline from use, but you're essentially renting the parking lot, if you will, or the surrounding area.
So this is something we would have liked to have for next week's.
But if we need more discussion and we need to take it into June.
We could have a special, we could vote following week.
Yes. So we're happy to gather any additional information. We're noting some of the additional comments, and we can come back with more information to the board. Okay to share that via email with all of you in advance of the next work session?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be good.
That would be great.
All right. Okay, so moving.
Thank you.
Thank you, yes.
Thanks, Carrie.
So moving on, the next topic is the held item of the LaSalle's Landing Comfort Station, and that again is Carrie Ivers.
Yeah, so, and Mark can join me in this one, but we discussed at last week's meeting some of the additional scope items that had been identified as staff are looking at the building as we're embarking on construction. And if we wanted to make modifications, now is the time to do it before the concrete slab is being poured. It is a specialized foundation system, so that to the extent that we can limit or minimize future need to cut into it, that would be in our best interest. And so I know that at the last work session, town board asked for some additional information related to the existing allowance amounts for each of the prime contracts. So I did provide that information to all of you via email. The modifications are well outside the scope of what these contractors bid on. A couple of them are minor enough that they could be navigated through an allowance if necessary. But we thought since they were all sort of related to facility modifications, we would bring them to you as a package for contemplation of amending the two impacted contracts. That would be for the general contractor and for the electrical contractor. If you're comfortable with those potential changes, then we would ask that those draft resolutions be acted on. If you're not, then we will revisit with the project team and determine what modifications can be accommodated using the allowance.
Questions or comments at this point?
This is tough. I know you realize that. Because it just brings the cost of this up. But yet, I understand if we don't do it, we're not getting what we need for the future.
And it would be more costly if, once.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
That was helpful, wasn't it?
I guess to build on that comment, I agree 100%. I think these are worthy projects. I think they should have probably been included in the original bid, which my concern is that now we're going to amend a bid, and we have no way of seeing if this is competitive pricing or if it's taking advantage of the fact that there is already holes in the ground and they can just lay it now. And so that's my biggest concern, is that financially, when I look at some of the prices for some of the things laid out, it doesn't add up to me as competitive pricing. And again, very worthy projects, very worthwhile endeavors, but
I will share that MRB Group did review each of the submitted, price proposals in response to these requested changes and has vetted them and would have gone back if they thought they were too high or were out of bounds or out of scope. So I think part of it is responding to what the town requested as far as equipment. And so they did review the detailed cost proposals, which included, and some of it also includes equipment rental. So it's not just, it's labor and equipment, not just, because it sounds, okay, we want new conduit, that sounds very inexpensive, but it's actually 3 days worth of labor, 3 days worth of equipment rental needed to dig because there's no equipment on site that the general contractor could even lend to the electrical contractor.
So I did send everybody, I think, a commentary about, the legality of doing a change order this way. I think it would be permissible under these circumstances. However, I don't want to delay the project too much, but is another legislative session next week, and you could ask. You could have MRB to tell them to go and try to sharpen their pencils a little bit. And
We'll share this will delay the project. They're ready and formed and waiting to pour the footer, pour the base. So that is on the schedule to do this week. So if we push the decision to next week, it will delay the project, and then we may incur costs from the contractor because now we've held them off. So just want to share that with the board.
I think it's either, my suggestion or my thought would be that's either moving forward with the contract amendments as presented, or I think in the email I did note that we could elect to move forward with a couple of the modifications utilizing allowance. So I think maybe that's.
But you don't know that today, what those would be?
We do. The costs we'd be picking, if we would move forward with the GC 01, which, and GC 02, which are needed. They need those. And then there's we would move forward with the sidewalk, and then we'd move forward with the additional conduit out to the right-of-way, because that was a nominal cost because they were already trenching. So it's just the equipment or the material cost. The other items could be, in the future.
But they would be more costly in the future, correct? Or would they,
Yeah, it's going back in and having to, saw cut into the foundation to create, or, connections that aren't there. There'd be some cost in the future. I couldn't tell you what that would be. I don't want to say it's more expensive or less expensive. I wouldn't be able to tell you that.
It doesn't make sense to me that it would be less expensive if they have to cut into concrete, install whatever has to be installed, and then repair the concrete.
Right.
Yeah, it's one of those that you don't like. It's a little messy, feels a little messy.
And I'm just going to pull up the summary again, just so everybody's looking at it. I think the GC01, we already approved that because the sidewalk was deemed important enough that we would use allowance if necessary, so that's why it shows as approved. But if the town board does want to amend contracts, we would incorporate that into the change, since it is technically a change order. The other one we would want to move forward with out of allowance would be the automated operator. That could be accommodated with allowance in both the contracts for EC, the electrical contractor, and the GC. So those two we could handle through those two we could handle through the allowance, no problem. It's the spare data communication conduit, it's the spare data communication conduit on two sides of the building, the data rack. We'd also move forward with the future conduit because, again, that's a minor enough change and it could be absorbed in the allowance.
Okay, I'm not understanding what advantage that is, using the allowance, and then what? Some things are left over that would be handled at a later date?
So I'll come back to, bear with me, I'm going to try to get back to another spot. So in each of the contracts, there's an allowance to cover unexpected costs that you can't know when you're bidding a project. So you encounter some additional asphalt under the ground that they couldn't know was there. That's going to require more work than would normally be required. The specified light fixture isn't available, and the one that's going to replace it is more expensive. There can be these kinds of changes that require the use of that allowance. It's sort of a cushion, if you will. You try not to use it. You really try to minimize using it. But if something's important enough, or you have no choice, often, the general contractor seemed fairly confident. And I think for the general contractor, the biggest piece or the biggest potential surprise was the foundation and the piles, and that we came very close on. It was a minor difference between what was anticipated versus what was actually needed. So not that you're not going to encounter additional surprises, but the one that could have really been a budget eater or an allowance eater has been, we've gotten past that.
Okay.
So am I reading this correctly, that if we use the allowance for the door hardware revisions for the automatic operator, there's still not a plan for the electrical revisions, so we'd have the hardware but not the electric?
No, the lecture, we could move forward. So on this one, electrical visit revisions for the automatic operator, that's for the push button on the single occupancy bathroom. That single occupancy bathroom faces the waterfront, and I think during design there was concerns or issues that could it be impacted by wind and it might fail over time, but the decision was made that even if it does fail, we should have that bathroom should be ADA accessible with a button. So elected to make that change. I think that's EC 06 here on the screen. And that there's enough potential budget in the allowance to allow us to move forward with that. And then the other change was the additional conduit, the EC 01, and that's a conduit out to the right of way.
Well, I think we should figure this out.
Well, Mark, to your point earlier, so let me just focus, for example, on EC03, the data rack. So getting back to needing to pour, and this is my ignorance, so I apologize, but the data rack, is there anything with that data rack line item that if that would, and I'm not saying we would, but if it was excluded, is that a problem as it relates to the pour?
I don't believe so.
Yeah, I think it's a conduit, anything that's going underground.
The conduit underground, so if the board could at least, we just kind of packaged it all together, saying it was one add for, these additional features, but to your point, yeah, the data rack could be delayed on that decisions.
Out to when it's.
The ECO2 and ECO4 are internal pieces that go to either side, so those are above ground, so those could.
Oh, I think those coming into the maintenance room.
Are those coming up through the floor?
Yeah, in the maintenance room.
So the
Yeah, ECO2 and ECO4, anything that has conduit is potentially impacting the access into the.
Yeah, the pour.
Yeah.
And I think everybody's sitting, it is kind of, it's one of those, like, you start looking at the bottom line numbers, and it's just, it's a big percentage change to Bill and Linda's point. And we appreciate all the work that's going into it. I'm just trying to think of ways to.
Yeah, certainly ECO3 could be held, that could be held out.
And what would the savings be, 6,400?
6,500.
65, okay.
Give or take.
Yeah, right, I can't see it very well.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay.
I'll zoom in, I'm so sorry.
No,
It
that's
seems
fine.
perfect on my screen. I'm so sorry.
I'm thinking in terms of efficiency as well, getting this project done, getting it done logically, and, you know, I'm concerned about the cost as well. But when you start taking this out and then this out, are we being efficient doing that? When we see the proposal here, we do have the option of getting it done and moving on. So I think we have to keep that in mind as well. It's a big project overall, you know, like we've made comment about, it's a bathroom, you know, and it's an expensive bathroom, but there's more to it than it just being a bathroom.
Sure.
Yeah.
We called it a comfort station because
Right.
it is a large pavilion. There is going to be a seating area. It is going to be a gathering space on the waterfront. You know, and those are the reasons why we believe it was funded by New York State, because of its, you know, the benefit to the community.
I think that's a good reference back to getting a significant grant for a part of this as well, so it's not all being funded directly by Penfield residents.
Well, that's a good thing to point out.
Can you review if we were only using allowance, what things would be left off this list?
If we're only using allowance, GC, I'm looking at the list in front of you, GCPCO 2 over here would not be included. Bear with me, ECO2 would not be included. ECO3, ECO4 would not be included for only using allowance. We'd be using it for 01, GCPCO3, and ECO6. Oh, but forgive me, ECO1 and ECO6.
And then, okay, if we use allowance for the others, how much of the allowance do you use? And then if you use it up, what happens if you need something down the road that would have been covered by allowance?
Yeah, so
That's the difficulty. It just doesn't make us as nimble. If something minor comes up,
Right.
we've got to pause to wait 2 weeks to come back to the board. That's
Right.
the
Yeah.
only
Yeah.
issue is using, you know, those contingencies are for the not unforeseen. You got $1,000 here,
Yeah.
something simple, we, you know, loop the supervisor in, but you can quickly react within, you know, less than a 2-week period if we've got to wait to come back. That's why we put it as an ad, you know,
Yeah.
showed it is an extra, had the discussion and the time to, you know, show this is additional things that we asked for. So these aren't things the contractor missed. These are things that, you know, staff and, you know, additional review has requested.
Is okay, for good
and that's-
reason, I think, you
Yeah,
know.
and that, but that's the reason why you have the contingency amount. So we are eating into that, and if we do run into something in the future, you do run, you know, the possible risk that
Right.
now are we delaying the project if we've got to wait 2 weeks to come back to, you know, do another ad before the board.
And if we didn't use any of the allowance and we don't need it,
We don't
That-
pay it.
We don't pay it.
okay.
So it's not their guaranteed money, and that's why I say you try not to use it. It's theirs, your buffer. It's for those minor things that, hey, you don't want to hold up the project. You know, they fall under that percentage if they're not used, not needed. You know, as Carrie had shared, we got out of the ground with a minor tweak on what, you know, what was thought. You know, that's where you kind of, the underground stuff is typically the area where you run into a lot of unforeseens and can run into, you know, additional costs. We got through that, you know, that went as planned, so that was great.
Yeah, that was a differential of, I think there were only 2,700, and that was, I think, the piece that, of the 60,000 that's allowance for the general contractor. We anticipated that number could go much higher. That's why that contract amount, or that allowance amount was higher than the others, just because that's the one with the most variability.
But if you don't spend it, then
You don't,
Right,
that's
then-
not-
if
that's
it's not
expended.
needed, it doesn't get spent.
Right.
And we're very clear, and MRB is very clear that, you know, the idea is to deliver projects without using all of the allowance when it's at all possible. That's really the goal.
Can I say, in my experience on the school board, we had numerous capital projects that, you know, came and went, And we always got the bid, and we always went through all the motions, and with every single project, there was always an additional something. This is not an unusual thing. What I'm concerned about is it's not even a concern. What we're faced with is we've got to make a decision, and neither one feels great. And so where I'm going with this is about the efficiency. I'm worried about using up, I can't think of the word now.
Allowance?
Yeah, the allowance. I was going to say cushion. I'm worried about using that up and then needing it down the road. And I'm also worried about having a finished product that is, really, folks, I mean, did we do the best decision with this not being here or that not being there? I don't like our options, but I do think they're, I don't really like the options, but I think we should think in terms of efficiency.
I think you make an excellent point with the efficiency argument. Mr. Attorney, question for you. In the event that we were to use the contingency budget and then piecemeal the rest of it together, does the supervisor have any discretionary ability to approve a change order up to a certain dollar threshold in our procurement?
I think it's 10,000.
Yes.
So in a world where we deplete this, he would still have the ability to sign off on a change order, thus not delaying a project further?
Except he would be, you'd have to look at the language of the resolution. I don't know that it's already been approved up to a certain amount, so you can approve. So I don't know, I'd have to look at the resolutions and see if that would be outside, because normally he would have $10,000 purchase authority, but now we're talking about, I don't know how to think about that a little bit more, as to whether he could do that. My concern would be on, the way you're thinking about it too, is if you're thinking about doing some by contingency and then the rest, at the end of the day, you're still going to spend the same amount. So you might as well spend that amount, and then you have the contingency available, and if you don't use it, then you have the contingency in your pocket.
Yeah.
But if we do use it, then we've used both. So if in the event of what you're describing is then we run into something,
Yeah.
we've used both.
But is there, what other contingencies might there be? Now they've done the digging for the most part.
I think it's kind of the same.
I think this one, we're in new construction, so it's a little different, get into other parts. And if you look back at the DPW, the underground was where we had the ads, we ran under unsuitable soil, we ran into other things.
That you couldn't have known.
The Clark House and the ads were dealing with an existing old building that again were kind of unknown.
The ads for that one there were 2 lamp posts that were outside the scope of the building project that we didn't address, and so that was an add-on because that was a contract amendment to the electrical contractor because it was outside the scope of the project because 2 existing lights. So those are the kinds of examples.
Yeah, so I think in our recent history, I don't think we've exceeded our contingency or gotten into it. So I think we've had pretty tight projects, recently. So we're not expecting to get into that. The underground was the biggest question mark. We've got that done. The helical piles are in. They're ready to pour. So, with a new build, not anticipating, need of contingency. But
Is there any feedback from MRB how this, I get all the things you spoke about so far, right? The ground, what they discovered, you wouldn't know, but some of these, how were they not parked?
So some of them were decisions made by staff at the time when the bid documents were being reviewed. And sometimes this falls into the category of hindsight's 2020, or, now there's additional folks that are coming to the table saying, hey, while you're building this, or there's, emerging needs that weren't, like, this is a bathroom facility, so there was no thought that we were ever going to need or want security cameras at a park that's, that was not an identified need during the
It
design
wasn't something that
process.
MRB brought to us.
Well, it would have been mentioned, but was saying, oh, no, we probably don't need it. Right now, there's not even a site parking, there's not even a site light, there isn't a street lamp out in that parking lot. So it's just hard to, you're imagining, okay, we're going to put the building, it's lit by Empire Boulevard lighting. So it was a decision that was made at the time.
So is part of this to put the to prepare for lights being there in the future?
Potentially.
Part of the conduits is to run lights for parking lots in the future, provide for cameras in the future. The door accesses weren't thought about at that time, but now staff is going through looking at for all of our facilities. So that's a potential add for, all of our bathrooms, other facilities is looking at this remote door access. So it's not just this one, that's something that's come up, since this and being looked at.
So rather than retrofitting it, we're having to retrofit some of our buildings to have those amenities. The thought was, okay, if we're moving in that direction at other park facilities, we should move in
Now's
that
the time
direction
to
here.
jump on that. So just some different thoughts and decisions since it went out to bid 6 months ago, are just coming to light now.
And I think to Catherine's, but to everybody's point, I agree with the efficiency part, which is why and maybe I'm fixated on it, and to Mark's point, and I'll say this, I know enough to be dangerous when it comes to something like the conduits. You don't want to have to redig. That's the efficiency part.
Yeah.
And I guess I'll just, it's fun to debate, because the data rack just seems high to me. It just seems like a high number.
Well, so, we certainly could, that's one item that we could certainly leave out of the.
And it's a 10% reduction from the total project increase, give or take. And maybe that's so, and I don't see that as hurting the efficiency. And I respect exactly what you're saying, Catherine. I really do. I really appreciate all of this. I'm just thinking out loud so we can work it through, that
And
it's
certainly-
a little less painful either way.
For the data rack, that's certainly something also we can talk to facilities staff to know whether or not there might be.
What they think.
Equipment
I think their
could be-
input would be, I
Something
didn't mean to
we could
interrupt.
add in
Yes,
terms-
you're right.
Yeah, the staff did, this was circulated to all the internal staff that's been
Gotcha.
reviewing, so everybody saw the numbers, and I'm like, are we okay to move this to the town board? There were no objections or concerns, but certainly the data rack is one that potentially could be held from installation now as part of the building and could be installed at a future date. If that's, that certainly could be
Or
a saving.
investigate it further and move ahead on the rest,
And then
which
it-
wouldn't hold up progress.
It's not going to hold the
That-
project.
That piece won't. The
That's my
conduits,
point.
the conduits and the other stuff is the stuff that, is time concerning. They're looking to take advantage of the nice weather. They've got the base formed, they're looking to pour as early as this week. So if, the board can make a decision, go move ahead with the conduits, get those in, pour it, and then, circle back on the data rack, that
And
that's
then
something we
that's
could
to
look at.
Bill's and Peter's point, too, that suddenly we're not using all of the funds. If it needed to be, it's something that I think the supervisor would have the authority to approve later on. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I think procedurally that's correct. And if I'm wrong, we can fix that. But it's just maybe a way to
Soften that.
take care of the key issues and still look at it. Just a thought.
So I do want to pose a question to the board at this point. If we decide to go to a vote and to go to the special legislative session for a vote, there will still be opportunity for discussion at that time. Do we know if we are ready to move toward a vote this evening at this point?
I think we need to.
Sounds like we have
right?
to.
If we don't,
Yeah, we do.
we're voting no anyway.
Right.
Then we might as well move on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
And finish up the work session and move into the
That's fine.
special ledge session. Okay. All right. So there was no old business, no new business. The next work session meeting is June 17th. And at this point, I would ask for unanimous consent to adjourn the work session. All right, seeing none, I will now adjourn that at 8:19. And I will call to order the special legislative session.
Excuse me, Mr. Supervisor, can I just take a quick break?
Absolutely.
Did you want to call the meeting to order and then excuse me, or can I be excused first?
You can be excused.
All right, thank you.
I think, yeah, we might still be live, just as everybody's
Yes,
aware.
I believe we still are.
Yeah, you're still on.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. And the earlier interruption was for cat sitting. That was the,
Well, that is important.
well, she doesn't know she's, can ring through at any time.
That's exactly why my phone is in my office.
Yes, I really have to leave it elsewhere.
And I send out, before we get here, I send out texts, remember, I have a meeting tonight, do not call, do not text. 911's only.
Why is it so hard to see if the girls won the flag football?
Oh,
It shouldn't be. Let's, actually, you know what? We'll try an alternate source.
were they playing in a state? No.
This is regional, so they're
Regional.
playing Kenmore, Buffalo area.
And then we have to beat them.
Yes, that's a matter of requirement.
Were they playing?
Kenmore.
Kenmore East or?
I believe so, yeah, Kenmore. It might be a joint team.
Oh, you're right, probably.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. So at this point, I will call the special legislative session to order, and we are here for the consideration of two items.
I should call the roll. Yeah. Right.
Absolutely.
Call the roll.
Call the roll
Yeah.
again?
Yes.
Okay.
Barry,
Here.
Dean,
Here?
Getz,
Here.
Lang,
Here.
Teglash.
Here,
Thank you.
We'll have to take these into consideration separately.
Yes.
All right, so the first one?
So the first one is 26T-104, amending the electrical contract for the LaSalle Landing Comfort Station.
Okay, and I believe this is falling under
Public Works.
Councilperson Lang.
I'll move it as written.
Okay, and then this specifically was for amending the electrical contract, okay? So I'll second. All right,
Barry?
is there discussion?
No, I don't think so.
Did you
Is this
want to
the-
amend it to take out the rack?
That would be my friendly amendment.
Okay. Do you have insight as to what that rack is for?
So the data rack is the physical structure that is installed inside the maintenance room, and I believe it's where any of the equipment associated with the door access control, the units are essentially installed.
that won't work without your data rack. So eventually, you'll have to put in the data
Yeah.
rack. Without it, you won't have the
It's
security.
kind of
you
like
won't
a
have the-
Raptor set, like.
Right.
It's just where,
It's where the equipment lives, so
I don't think we should pull it. I understand what you're, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Nope, absolutely.
Apologize.
You can cut me off anytime.
I mean, if we did pull it and it comes time to put it in, we could put it in at that point.
Well, then what's the point of pulling it?
If you wanted me to see if there's because we're going off of the price that the EC is providing, if we see if it's
Yeah,
available.
so this could be to approve the change orders up to this total amount, and then, give staff some discretion to see if we can do that at a later date, I guess.
Well,
And if we could get it for cheaper.
Right, but it's at the later date that I have issue with, because I don't want the building to be done, and then we're waiting on a data rack. I feel it's more efficient to get the job done now.
Well, you also want to think about the connectivity, right?
Yeah, well, I hadn't thought of that, but it's a good point.
I mean, somebody's going to have to go in and,
Yeah. It's MRB who gave their opinion that these are reasonable prices.
Yeah, they wouldn't have passed it on to us until they were until they were vetted or reviewed for accuracy and.
I do understand the board's hesitancy, but I think it's more prudent to go forward for efficiency's sake. So that's my contribution to the conversation.
Okay.
So procedurally, how would we deal with
So
the
right now, there's a
question?
motion, a second, there's a motion to amend, there's no second on that.
Well,
So-
we haven't asked for one yet, right?
No.
But if nobody seconds it, it just stops.
Then it's just,
Oh,
then it
okay.
just stands as
I'm
is.
sorry. All right, the motion is amending the electrical contract
To take out the data rack.
to take out the data rack. Okay.
So there's a motion for that.
If there is no second to it, then the original motion
Right.
would stand.
It's just the motion as written,
Okay,
the
so-
resolution as written.
The motion as written is to accept that as it is?
Correct.
Correct, for
Okay.
the electrical.
I second that.
You did.
Yeah, it was already.
Okay.
So I don't know if there's any further discussion on that?
On the amendment or on general?
No, so now we're just talking about the original motion
Original motion.
as written to amend the electrical contract.
Okay.
I would just say in the future, for projects like this, we need to take a harder look at the things that we're including in our bid, because these seem like they should have been included originally.
lesson learned.
Yeah.
Yeah. And unfortunately, that's a lesson we've learned more than once recently, so that's one thing that really.
It's
we-
cost of
we have
doing
to-
business, I get it, but this one is a tough one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I understand that, too.
Yep. Okay. So, is there any further discussion on this item? So we're okay to move?
Yeah, so you're okay to move to a vote?
Okay.
Right, for roll
As
call.
written.
Yeah, as written.
Barry?
Aye.
Dean?
Aye.
Getz?
Aye.
Lang?
Aye.
Teglash?
Aye.
All aye.
All right, so the next,
The next one is 26T-105, amending the general construction contract for the LaSalle's Landing Comfort Station.
I'll move it as written.
I'd second.
is there discussion?
Just the same note as before, should have been included on the original bid. The oversight is concerning, but we learned the lesson this time.
Any other discussion? All right, then we can move to a vote.
Barry?
Aye.
Dean?
Aye.
Getz?
Aye.
Lang?
Aye.
Teglash?
Aye.
All aye.
And I do want to make the comment that I know how hard the staff works on this, and it's hard not to look at it and say, oh, lesson learned. A lot of times you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And I can see this, right? It's a bathroom, it's a comfort station. So we've all learned. So I just want to make sure that there's no finger pointing. We're not trying to do that. We're just saying, lesson learned.
I think
going
also
forward.
it's, needs are evolving. And so I think that's one of the other things is as needs evolve, are how we plan and, our capital projects is going to shift as well. So that this is, trust me, it's a lesson learned moment for all of us. And
Yeah.
But I think you bring up a really good point that, first of all, you said you don't know what you don't know, and that doesn't really become apparent until you get into it sometimes and then see things evolve. So,
And I don't think anyone's finger pointing toward the staff at all, but I do think that one of the lessons that we've learned both with this and with DPW, with the DPW building, is to make sure that all of the people who need to be in the room are in the room. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons to be learned.
Yeah, I think the lessons for the board, it has nothing to do with the staff. It's,
Agreed.
as we oversee
You're
these
right.
projects, those are things we need to.
Moreover, yeah.
Okay. So with that, there's no further business for this. The next legislative meeting will be June 3rd. So with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
so moved.
Second.
And we do need to call the roll for this.
All right, Barry?
Aye.
Dean?
Aye.
Getz?
Aye.
Lang?
Aye.
Teglash?
Aye.
All aye.
Are we clear?